Well, welcome, Melissa, to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today, and you're going to talk to us about some fun stuff. But first, why don't you introduce yourself?
Awesome. Thank you, Cassie. Well, I am Melissa Campbell, and I am talking to you today from Fort Payne, Alabama, which is in the northeastern corner of the state, which is great where we're situated because it's a smaller town. But I am about an hour from Chattanooga, Tennessee, a couple of hours from Atlanta, and then about an hour from the University of Alabama in Huntsville, which is where I work from. I am a K-5 math specialist with what is known as AMSTI, or the Alabama Math, Science, and Technology Initiative. And we are a state initiative that is designed to improve both math and science teaching statewide. And our mission is basically to support both educators and students in improving STEM by doing STEM. And we do that through resource support. We provide professional learning. And then we also provide on site support, which is my favorite part.
Oh, so fun. So I was a math specialist too, my last year in the school in a school setting, and I bet your day looks very different than what I did just in a school setting. So if you could imagine like your best day, I'm sure you do lots of different things every day, but on a day that you're super excited to go to work, what would you be doing?
Right. Well, I have to preface it by saying one of the best things about my job is that every day is the same while every day is different because I travel to schools across the region. So, a lot of different schools, a lot of different students, a lot of different admin. But the best part of my job, when we just boil it down to the nuts and bolts of what I do, is that I coach math coaches.
Mm.
So getting to do that while still being allowed to, go into the classroom and interact with the kiddos, I think is just the best part of what I do.
Amazing. So you are focused on math and science, but you had mentioned to me how much you love reading too. So you're maybe not focused on literacy like you thought you might be. In fact, whenever I first became a teacher, I just got a job teaching math. And before that, I never ever thought that I would teach math. I was a language person. I loved reading. I especially loved writing. That's the only thing I could picture myself doing. But once I was thrown into math, I just loved it so much. And a couple years later, I had the opportunity to teach ELA. And I ended up just doing that for the 1 year because I missed teaching math and science so much. So that is funny how we can have a passion for both things.
Yes, most definitely. And I was always a reader. I don't remember not knowing how to read. And I always thought, once I graduated, got in a classroom, that if I went for an advanced degree, it would be reading specialist, reading interventionist, something along those lines. But then I was afforded the chance to actually participate in some AMSTI training. And I had some great support from a couple of math coaches, Lisa McDonough and Sherry Gibbs, who really helped me understand that I was a mathematician and it was okay to not look at it the same way everyone else did. And that's when I began approaching math in a different way, helping my kids see they could approach it in a different way. And from there, it just grew. And now I'm blessed enough to work with Lisa McDonough at AMSTI. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it is just an extra added superpower if you have a love for literacy because then you're naturally going to want to embed it into your math and science.
Mhm.
So what are some ways, or maybe even a better question would be, why do you think it's important to infuse reading into the other content areas?
Well, there is actually a great book that explains some of that to teachers that is called What If Your ABCs Were Your One, Two, Threes? by, I believe it's Leslie Minton. And she does a great job of just explaining to teachers that there is overlap, that there are things that are the same, and just ways to kind of get it together. But I personally, when I think about how I would communicate it to others, I think by connecting them, we are giving kiddos a better avenue to understand and interact with their world, with themselves and others.
Yes, I think you're so right. And also I think there's a disconnect in math sometimes that it isn't a part of your world in the same way that reading is, but mathematics is definitely a part of your world. It isn't something that you learn in isolation or use in isolation. Now
Yeah.
you have a book you told me about that you love to use in your math
Yeah.
lessons called Stuck. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Stuck is a picture book by Oliver Jeffers. You may be familiar with him through the book. I believe it's The Day the Crayons Taught. Yes. Okay. But this is about a little boy named Floyd, and I'll just read the blurb on the back if you don't mind. But it says it all began when Floyd got his kite stuck in a tree. But the trouble really began when he threw a shoe up to knock the kite loose, and the shoe got stuck too, followed by a ladder, a bucket of paint, the kitchen sink, an orangutan, and a whale who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's really just the start of things. If only Floyd could think of an idea to sort this out once and for all.
I have not read that book. It sounds so cute.
Yes, you must read this.
I also can tell it's well loved, and I like see the teacher's name at the top in the corner.
Yes, and I have like every page taped inside because it's fallen apart so much. But I gravitated towards this book because kids enjoy the humor. But then the title stood out to me because so often, we tell children we want them to persevere or we want them to keep working, but we don't help them develop a plan for what that should look like. So when I first approached the idea of using this book in the math classroom, it was getting near to standardized testing time. And I was going into a lot of second grade classrooms the first year they take the assessment and helping them develop a plan for what was going to happen when they got stuck. And we just, we brainstormed what it meant. We talked about how you felt when you were stuck. And then we devised their plan of what they could do. What are some strategies when I get stuck? Here's what I could do. Here's what I probably don't want to try. Because Floyd is a good picture of I don't really have a plan other than I'm going to throw stuff at it. So, so how can we develop a better plan than Floyd?
I love that. And especially thinking about standardized testing time, because we do focus so much. One of our teaching strategies is use your strategies. We probably all say that a million times. And we have taught explicitly what those strategies might look like in the math classroom. Maybe it's draw a picture, maybe it's guess and check, those kinds of strategies.
Right.
But we don't really talk about the emotional strategy of what to do when you don't even know which strategy to pick. And
Right.
you tried to guess and check and you've guessed 15 different things and not one of them checks out. It goes to the character of the mathematician to keep going and to problem solve from there.
Yes, awesome. I agree totally. And I continue using the book in that way, but it's kind of branched out because I've gotten such a response that I've also taken it in at the beginning of the year to just get them thinking about I'm asked to persevere. That's SMP number one. I'm going to work on this problem solving. I'm going to persevere with it. What does that look like? Do I just sit there? Do I wait on someone else? What do I do? So I've kind of broadened the scope of how I use the book, and I've done lessons about that as well.
Yeah, I don't know the book and I haven't read it and I don't know how it ends, but I do imagine there's a lesson in just sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to stop persevering on what you were doing in the first place. So if you're trying something over and over, like throwing different things at the kite to get it to fall down, and you at some point you've got to make the decision that that's not working and move on and try something else. And that's, a lesson in itself too.
Yes, and there is a reason, that the science and engineering practices and the SMPs that overlap in a lot of ways, that it's cyclical and that it's not just linear. Sometimes we have to stop and say, okay, this plan I've got, is it really working? Or is there a better strategy?
So, just for my own curiosity, how does the book end?
Oh gosh, I didn't want to tell
Okay,
anybody
then
that.
no,
That's
don't give it away then. If
I
it's
can show you a picture.
oh yeah, sneak me a picture.
So YouTube can see that, but podcasters can't. So
Okay.
Floyd has gone to bed, and that's the last thing they see. And that's another reason I adore this book, is because there are so many ways to use this book to get kids writing, to talk about grammar, because the book uses ellipses and a lot of things, that are this form is an easy way to introduce synonyms, because we're talking about throwing, and there are a lot of words for that. So just a great book and helps with math, but I encourage everyone to use it in their classroom.
Okay, I love that. So, that is a book I wish I would have known about. Do you have any other books that you think all teachers should be using?
Well, I sent you a list that I guess we can attach in the notes.
Okay.
So I won't, again, I hate to be a spoil and tell everything, but I will share two of they're not necessarily newer books, but newer finds, as far as some that I've been in love with and using recently. And one of those is by Dr. Jim Hewing. And he wrote a book called Juan Jose, You Are a Special. And it's all about a little boy who is at this crossroads, as much as you can be in a children's picture, but he's at a crossroads because at home he speaks Spanish and at school he has to speak English. And what does he do? And he finally comes to the realization, through the help of his teacher, that knowing both those languages makes him special. And he has a talent because of it. So, again, just the idea of perseverance and having the mindset that you can. But then I've also used that book in some trainings I've done for schools to talk about why the use of cognates are important to those kids who are multilingual.
Mm. Yeah, I had another podcast guest, Lily Reyna, that talked about the same thing. She's a
Yeah.
bilingual teacher, but in part of her episode, she talked about what she did for her students with the cognates.
Yes. Awesome.
Interesting.
Yes. Now, that's actually one of my passions, getting people to recognize that. And then another book I've read recently is called The Girl with the Big, Big Questions. And it was written by Brittany Lee. And in that book, one of the students in the classroom, a little girl, is always asking questions when the teacher's trying to teach, when they're out on the playground, and her friends are just sick of it. You've got to stop asking questions. We're tired of it. And then one day, this real world math problem and science problem arises. And she brings the questions to everyone, and then they all start working on it together. So that's an awesome read as well.
Oh, I love that. And that is also very aligned to another podcast episode we had by Rachel Gurr. And she talked all about giving your students the chance to become learners by providing them with these open-ended, really tough questions or
Mm-hmm.
problems, and then letting them work together to find solutions to those.
Oh, wow.
So we have a wealth of information here. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, where do you find ideas for books that would be good for integrating, not just for fun and for the love of reading, but to align to a topic or a skill or maybe even a character trait that you're trying to teach?
Right. Well, I think I can get inspiration for that from anywhere. I have always been a reader. I volunteered in a library. I did a lot of work behind the scenes, so to speak, in or related to children's literature. So I kind of have, okay, I'm embarrassed to say it, maybe one, two, maybe six bookshelves at home that are full of just picture books. But then I also use the advice of others. I love reaching out to colleagues across the state. I've been in some book clubs with some various other podcasters, and they're usually a wealth of knowledge. Then we are also lucky enough to have access to Math by the Book and Math in Practice, which are two programs that help children with certain math skills, but each skill is connected to a piece of literature.
Hmm.
And a lot of times that gives me inspiration because I'll be like, oh, I believe it or not, I don't have that book, but I do have this other one that relates. So
That
that's
sounds like I've never
inspiration.
heard of Math by the Book, but that sounds like a really cool resource for people to find specific skills and books that align. I remember whenever I was in college and I was in my math for elementary school teachers class, we had this assignment where we had to choose a picture book and we had to make it into a math lesson, but it couldn't be one that was necessarily designed to be a math lesson. So we just had to take a regular old book. I can't remember. We might have even been assigned the book. And then we had to basically write out a script for the lesson that we were going to give. And at first I was overwhelmed because I didn't think that this book that I had, which was a Berenstain Bears book, had any kind of math tie-in. But whenever I was done with the assignment, I realized that every single page had some kind of thing that I could teach mathematically, just whether it was in the pictures or whether it was in the actions that the characters were doing. I could make math problems basically out of any book. And what a way to build a love for math for those students that don't like math, but they
Right.
do like reading.
Yes. And I love that you said that. When I was still teaching second grade and we were self contained, so I taught them math and reading. Um, I actually had a station that was called the Math Book Report Station. And they picked books out of the basket that were not math books and wrote a math book report. Did you find any math words? Did you see any, pictures that you could use to tell a math story? And those kinds of things to help them see that math and reading aren't separate. They don't have to be separate. They're everywhere.
How important. And also from I guess in second grade, a lot of teachers are still self-contained, but by the time you get to fourth grade, at least in Texas, the
Mhm.
majority of teachers are no longer self-contained and they're only teaching math or they're only teaching reading. And that makes it much more difficult to integrate the two subjects. So if you are a math teacher, your ELA, your switch partner is going to be so happy that you are integrating it and vice versa.
Yes. Yes. And you kind of just have to be brave and do it. Think about the interests of your kids. Think about what their world looks like and choose a book that relates to them. It doesn't have to be, a math book that's called length that talks to you about what a ruler is and why we measure. It can be a book like Stuck, or it can be a book like Juan Jose to get kids thinking about math.
Well, I love talking to you just because I can see both your love for math and your love for ELA. And a lot of times we don't see that. And especially as teachers go to the older grades, you start getting into middle school and especially high school, you have teachers that are like, nope, I hate math. I can't, I, can't do it at all. And the other way around. And I can see that because before I was given the opportunity to teach math, I felt the exact same way. Like I'm not that good at math. I won't, I wouldn't be a good teacher of math, but I am really good at reading and writing. So I should do that. And I just found that was not the case at all. I actually preferred teaching math. So, speaking of math, I thought it would be fun if we played a little game where I have written some math story problems that are about some really popular children's books and some not so popular children's
Okay.
books. So I'm going to give you the story problem and you have to guess what book it is. Now, you could use this in your classroom too if you have different reading groups going on. Maybe you have lit circles that are small groups and some kids are reading this book and some kids are reading that book. So you could do story problems for your math class just based on that. And it's not really aligned to the book or integrated, but it is just a fun way to give that nod to the children that are reading that book. It always feels special when you're reading a book or when someone knows the book you're reading. This
Mhm.
year I have made it my New Year's resolution to read more, and I have read 50 books this year.
Oh,
And
wow.
well, I've read over 50 books now, but I used to never notice when other people in my Facebook friends or whatever would say like, oh, I just read this book. I would not even notice because I wasn't reading books and I knew I couldn't connect with that. But now it's someone's like, oh, I just read this book, and the feeling that it gets when you're like, oh, I've read that too. So even doing something little like this, making math problems out of the books that are in your classroom, kind of give that connection to the students that are
Mhm.
reading that book. Okay, here's the first one. This probably was my absolute number one favorite book to read to my students. A boy is digging in the desert. He's digging holes that are 5 feet wide and 5 feet deep. If he's already dug 3 holes, how many total square feet of dirt has he moved? What book is that?
Okay, now I know that one. And you said holes, so that would be holes.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I was like, that's probably going to give it away too easy. Holes is my favorite book to read, and I think that you could integrate some math and science things into this book if you wanted to. Okay, here's another one. This was one of my favorite books when I was a child.
Okay.
A mouse rides his motorcycle around a hotel, traveling at 3 miles per hour. If he rides for 4 hours, how many miles does he travel around the hotel?
Okay, you gave it away again, but this is also one of my favorite authors from when I was a child, and that's Mouse and the Motorcycle by Beverly Cleary.
Yep. And I loved Beverly Cleary as a child myself. And the motorcycle books, they were my favorite. I mean, I wasn't into like rodents or motorcycles or anything,
Right.
but just the idea of that little mouse, like having the adventures. I loved that book.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. A group of siblings who've never been in a Christmas pageant are cast in all the lead roles. The oldest takes 3 rehearsals to memorize their lines, while the youngest takes 5 rehearsals. If there are 6 rehearsals in total, how many rehearsals do the kids need to be ready for the pageant?
Okay, best children's theater I ever saw was about the Herdmans in Best Christmas Pageant Ever.
Yes, yes, that is. And I have actually seen the play too. And whenever I saw the play, I don't know if this is typical, but they used a puppet for one of the Herdman kids. So the whole entire show, everybody was people except for one of them, and it was this big elaborate puppet that.
Oh, wow, how cool.
So, anyways, yeah, that's fun just to make little problems. Just you can make a problem out of anything, and you may have noticed some of those problems had multi-steps. They were difficult. They're good ones to just write out and have the students work together to find those answers. So, as we close out, do you have any final tips for teachers who just want to integrate reading into their blocks?
I think I've kind of touched on it already, but I'll reiterate that you be brave and step out there. Recognize that children's literature does belong in the math classroom. And I will tell you, I have taken this book into classrooms up to sixth and seventh graders who just enjoy the story. They certainly don't get read to anymore, and they love that. And it gets them to relate to math in a whole new way. So if you're not doing it, start. That would be my advice.
So if our listeners want to reach out to you or follow you, can they do that somewhere?
I would love that. I am on Twitter, I guess we're calling it. My handle would be at Mel A.G. Campbell. And
We'll
then
put that in the show notes too so that they can find
yes,
it.
I believe I included that in my notes I sent you. But then my email would be Melissa, Melissa .Campbell. And then the second part, either at uah.edu or at amsti.org would work. And I will tell everyone that if they would like to know more about AMSTI, amsti.org is actually a web address, and they can check out what we do there.
It sounds like y'all are doing amazing things with students.
Yes, we are so lucky and so blessed. You know, through the Alabama Numeracy Act that was fairly recently passed, our goal is to have an elementary mathematics coach in every K-5 school in Alabama by 2027. So we're well on our way. We plan to keep growing that initiative and doing what we can to make math and science and technology better for all the kiddos in Alabama.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I've had fun talking to you, and I definitely want to go read that book now because you said that the whale was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yes.
And I want to see what that's all about. So
Awesome. I invite you to. You're going to love it. And thanks for having me.
thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.